Have you ever sat quietly in your favorite chair, watching the world outside your window and thought, there are things I've felt for years, but maybe I should just keep them to myself? If so, you're not alone. Growing older brings with it a special kind of wisdom, a quiet understanding that not everything needs to be said aloud, even to those we love most, especially to those we love most. As parents, we've spent much of our lives pouring ourselves into our children. From their first steps to their first heartbreaks, we've been there. We've sacrificed time, energy, even dreams, just to make sure they had the best chance in life. And we did all of it with love. But now, as the years catch up with us and we begin to reflect more deeply, a new challenge arises. What should we say and what should we leave unsaid? This isn't about hiding who we are or being dishonest. It's about recognizing that silence at times is a gift. The gift of not burdening those we love with our regrets, our disappointments, or our aches that have settled into our bones and memories. In this gentle conversation, I want to talk to you, just you and me as friends, about 7 things we might feel tempted to share with our children, but perhaps shouldn't. Not because we're ashamed, but because wisdom sometimes means knowing when to speak and when to simply hold space. Let's begin with something that many of us carry quietly, the urge to blame our own parents for the lives we've lived. It's easy, especially when looking back, to say, if only my father had worked harder, or if only my mother had been more supportive, I could have had a better life. I've heard these words whispered with sadness, and I've felt them in my own moments of reflection. But the truth is, our parents, like us, did what they could with what they knew. They were flawed, they made mistakes, so did we. Passing those judgments down to our children, sharing those lingering resentments, does more harm than we realize. When we speak that blame aloud, especially in front of our children, we don't just share a personal truth. We teach a lesson. We tell them that it's okay to carry resentment, that it's acceptable to look backward and place the weight of our unhappiness on someone else's shoulders. And what does that leave them with? The idea that one day they might be blamed too. That, one day, we might expect them to carry our emotional load. That's not the legacy we want to pass on. Instead, we have an opportunity to model forgiveness, to say, they weren't perfect, but they loved me the best way they knew how. That kind of grace doesn't erase the past, but it transforms it. And in doing so, we free our children from the heaviness of generational blame and offer them a future that feels lighter. Another thing we often find ourselves tempted to share, especially in moments of quiet frustration, is our disappointment in our spouse. Maybe you've been married for 30, 40, even 50 years, and let's be honest, marriage isn't always a fairy tale. There are long nights, sharp words, and disappointments that stack up like forgotten letters in a drawer. But those feelings, as valid as they are, don't need to be unpacked in front of our children. You might think, but they're grown. They'll understand, and maybe they will. But understanding doesn't mean it won't hurt. When we say things like, I could have done better, or I wasted my good years, even as passing remarks, we crack the foundation they built their sense of family on. Whether they're 6 or 60, our children want to believe in the love that raised them. And when we chip away at that image, we leave them feeling unsettled, confused, sometimes even guilty for not noticing our unhappiness. What we often forget is that our spouse is not just our partner, they're also our child's other parent. Speaking ill of them, even subtly, forces our children into emotional corners. Do they defend one parent? Do they stay silent? Do they absorb that tension into their own marriages or relationships? None of these outcomes are fair. Instead, we can choose to remember the good, the laughter, the teamwork, the years of doing our best together. Maybe your partner wasn't perfect, who is? But maybe they were also kind or hardworking or steady when you needed them most. A simple sentence like, we had our struggles but we loved each other, can preserve dignity, offer truth, and protect your child's heart all at once. And while we're speaking of children, there's something else worth mentioning. something that might be the hardest of all: the comparisons. As parents, especially with more than one child, it's so easy to fall into this trap. Maybe one of your children is thriving while another seems lost. Maybe one calls every week and the other drifts in and out of contact. And without meaning to, we let the words slip. Your sister always remembered my birthday, or why can't you be more like your brother? Have you ever found yourself sitting quietly in your favorite chair, looking out the window, and reflecting on the world outside, only to think, there are so many things I've felt over the years, but maybe I should just keep them to myself? If so, you're certainly not alone. Growing older comes with its own kind of wisdom, a quiet, almost unspoken understanding that not everything needs to be expressed out loud. In fact, sometimes the most meaningful things we can say are the ones we choose to keep within ourselves. This is especially true when it comes to those we love most. As parents, we've spent much of our lives pouring our time, energy, and hearts into our children. From their first steps to their first heartbreaks, we've been there for it all, offering guidance and support in countless ways. We've sacrificed, sometimes without a second thought, sacrificing time, dreams, and even parts of ourselves, just to make sure they had every opportunity to thrive. And all of it, every step, has been done with love. But as the years pass and we find ourselves reflecting more deeply on our own lives, a new challenge arises. What should we say to them? And more importantly, what should we leave unsaid? This is not about hiding who we are or pretending to be something we're not. It's about recognizing that sometimes silence can be a powerful gift. The gift of not burdening those we love with the weight of our own regrets, disappointments, or struggles that have quietly settled into our bones and memories over the years. In Suar, this quiet reflection, I want to talk to you, just you and me as friends, about the 7 things we often feel compelled to share with our children but perhaps shouldn't. Not because we are ashamed or afraid of the truth, but because true wisdom often lies in knowing when to speak and when to hold space, allowing our loved ones the chance to simply be who they are without carrying the emotional weight of our own experiences. Let's begin with something that many of us carry quietly within: the temptation to blame our parents for the paths our lives have taken. It's something that many of us, in our quieter moments of reflection, may have thought, if only my father had worked harder, or if only my mother had been more supportive, maybe I would have had a better chance at life. These thoughts, often laced with sadness and regret, can linger with us, haunting our memories. I've heard these words whispered, and I've felt them in my own life too. But the truth is, our parents, just like us, did the best they could with what they knew and had. They were not perfect, far from it. They made mistakes just as we all do. But passing those judgments down to our children, sharing our lingering resentments, can do more harm than we realize. When we speak those words aloud, especially in front of our children, we're not just sharing a personal truth, we are teaching them a lesson. We are showing them that it's okay to carry resentment, that it's acceptable to look back at our past and place the weight of our unhappiness on someone else's shoulders. What does that teach them? It teaches them that one day they too may be blamed for things beyond their control, that they will eventually be expected to carry our emotional burdens, just as we may have carried our parents' burdens. That's not the legacy we want to leave behind. Instead, we have an opportunity to choose forgiveness. We can tell our children, they weren't perfect, but they loved me in the best way they knew how. That act of grace doesn't erase the past or make it any less complicated, but it transforms it. And by doing so, we free our children from the heaviness of generational blame, offering them a future where they don't have to carry that weight. Another thing we often feel tempted to share, especially during moments of frustration, is our disappointment in our spouse. Perhaps you've been married for decades, 30, 40, even 50 years. And let's face it, marriage isn't always a fairy tale. It has its share of long, difficult nights, misunderstandings, sharp words, and disappointments that sometimes pile up, like forgotten letters in a drawer. But as valid as those feelings are, they don't need to be unpacked in front of our children. You might think, but they're grown now, they'll understand. And maybe they will. But even understanding doesn't mean it won't hurt. When we casually drop comments like, "I could have done better," or "I feel like I wasted my best years," even in passing, we risk cracking the very foundation that your children's sense of family is built upon. Whether your children are 6 or 60, they still want to believe in the love that raised them. And when we speak negatively of their other parent, we begin to chip away at that image, leaving them feeling unsettled and confused. At times, it can even lead them to feel guilty for not noticing our unhappiness or for not doing more to help. What we often forget is that our spouse isn't just our partner in life. They're also our child's other parent. Speaking ill of them, even in subtle ways, forces our children into emotional corners. Should they defend one parent? Should they remain silent? Should they absorb that tension into their own relationships? These are unfair burdens to place on anyone, let alone our children. Instead, we can choose to focus on the good, the laughter, the teamwork, the years of working together to raise a family. Maybe your partner wasn't perfect, but who is? Perhaps they were kind when you needed most, or hardworking when things got tough, or steady when you felt lost. A simple sentence like, "We had our struggles, but we loved each other," can go a long way in preserving the dignity of your relationship, offering the truth, and protecting your child's heart all at once. And while we're on the topic of children, there's something else we often slip into without meaning to. Something that might be the hardest to confront: the comparisons. As parents, especially when we have more than one child, it can be easy to fall into the trap of comparisons. Maybe one of your children is flourishing, excelling at work, in relationships, or in life, while another seems to be struggling to find their footing. Perhaps one is always checking in, while the other seems to drift in and out of contact. Without even realizing it, we may find ourselves saying, "Your sister never forgets my birthday," or, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" It's often not the intention to harm, but the words we speak can wound deeply, leaving marks we don't always see. Even when we praise one child, there's a subtle pressure created, a bar set too high to maintain. The one on the receiving end of comparison may silently feel the weight of trying to live up to that image, convinced that love is a prize to be earned rather than something freely given. In the space where sibling relationships should be growing and flourishing, comparison breeds tension. What starts as gentle encouragement can transform into a quiet rivalry, jealousy, and ultimately, an emotional distance that can feel nearly impossible to mend. The ties that once connected siblings begin to fray as feelings of hurt and resentment replace the trust and bond they once shared. What we forget in those fleeting moments of frustration is that every child has their own rhythm, their own pace of development, and their own unique way of making sense of the world. One child might quickly find their footing, achieving milestones with ease, while another seems to struggle a bit more, not because they lack potential, but because they may be navigating a more difficult path. One might reach out consistently, while the other drifts often in search of their own space. Yet, in the eyes of a parent, both deserve the same unconditional love, without the comparison of one to the other. Each journey is as valid as the next, and to measure them against one another is to diminish the very uniqueness that makes them who they are. When we speak to them, let us remember that every word holds weight. Let it reflect who they are and not who they aren't. A simple statement like, "I see how hard you're trying," or "You've always had such a kind heart," serves not only as validation but as a balm to any wound we may have unintentionally inflicted. These affirmations go beyond surface-level praise. They nurture the soul, allowing each child to feel seen and valued in their own right. They remind them that love is not a contest, but a gift freely given. As we reflect on these thoughts, you might find yourself remembering things you wish you could undo, moments you regret, words spoken in haste or frustration. That's okay. Life is about growth and learning, and as we move through this stage of life, We're continuously given opportunities to start anew. We have the chance to be gentler with ourselves and with those we love. In this moment, we can choose to approach each interaction with more compassion, more understanding, and more patience. Let's take a quiet moment together to breathe, to pause, and to reflect. There is still so much to explore, so many layers of understanding to uncover. But for now, let us embrace this simple truth. Silence, when chosen with love and intention, can speak more profoundly than words ever could. The unspoken truths we hold close to our hearts, guarded with tenderness and wisdom, may turn out to be some of the greatest gifts we could ever offer to those we love. It's a realization that often comes only with time. The understanding that true peace is not always found in what we say, but in what we choose not to say. And as we continue this conversation, just you and me, let's gently navigate through a few more deeply human truths. Truths that, while natural, might be better kept within the confines of our hearts. One such truth is a habit many of us fall into without even realizing it, dwelling on the negative aspects of life. Growing older often brings a flood of changes, not just to our bodies but to the world around us. We feel the aches and pains that weren't there before, the subtle shift in the rhythms of our lives, the passing of loved ones, and the overwhelming pace of a world that sometimes seems to leave us behind. It's only natural to feel frustration, maybe even a sense of bitterness from time to time. The weight of years lived, and the loss of what once was can easily lead to a narrative that is consumed with what is missing. However, when our daily conversations become dominated by complaints about our physical discomforts, about the state of the world, about what we've lost or what we can no longer do, we unknowingly transfer that burden to those around us, especially to our children. Even when we believe they may not be paying attention, they hear every sigh, every whispered disappointment, every subtle sign of resignation, and although they might not voice it, those words weigh on them. They become anxious, feeling the weight of our sorrow even when they are powerless to change anything. But it's not just the words about the state of the world or our personal losses that weigh heavily. There's also the delicate issue of our dependence on our children. It's natural as we age to require more help, whether that's financial support, emotional comfort, or practical assistance. Yet when we rely on our children too heavily, especially without expressing our needs with care, we unknowingly place a heavy emotional burden on them. The weight of that responsibility can foster feelings of guilt, resentment, and frustration, especially if they feel they cannot provide enough or are overwhelmed by the task at hand. This burden can strain even the most loving relationships, leading to an unspoken tension that's difficult to address. Needing help is not a weakness, but how we ask for that help can make all the difference. If we find ourselves in a position where we must rely on our children, it's crucial to approach them with openness, not expectation. We should say things like, "I know it's difficult for me to ask this, but I could use some help," or "Please only help me if it doesn't interfere with your own needs." This allows them to offer support freely without guilt and helps maintain a sense of mutual respect and love. And if possible, we can take steps now to preserve our independence for as long as we can. Whether that means seeking advice on managing our finances, revisiting our budgets, or simply being honest with ourselves about what we truly need, we can find ways to ease that burden before it becomes too heavy. Our children deserve to live their own lives, free from the weight of our expectations, and we deserve to maintain our dignity as we continue on our own journey. Finally, let's address something deeply personal: our health as we age. As doctors, appointments become more frequent, and we feel physical discomforts we've never experienced before. It's only natural to want to share those feelings with our children. We want them to understand, to listen, to be there for us. However, oversharing, every ache and every concern can unintentionally create anxiety for them. They may worry endlessly, feel powerless in the face of our pain, or become overwhelmed by the constant barrage of health-related discussions. It's important to find a balance. We can share the significant concerns, the moments that truly need attention, But perhaps we don't need to overburden them with every small discomfort. Some things can remain between us and our doctors, or even just within ourselves, unless it's something that directly affects them. We can reassure them by offering simple, reassuring words like, "I'm taking good care of myself," or "I'm in touch with my doctor, and everything looks good." This provides them with the comfort of knowing we're taking care of ourselves while still being open to their support when it's truly needed.